Hello and welcome to all the ghouls and vampires out there. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
Today's movie doesn't really have much to do with ghouls or vampires, more with zombies and demons. The intro's a little wrong. The movie here is a fan film, but it's actually better than a lot of the Friday the 13th actual films from the 80s. And after the 80s. This may be something that's a little controversial to an extent. Now, this movie essentially goes with the idea that everything after Part 6 is pretty much non-canon, which I actually prefer that, because after Part 6, Friday the 13th really drops off in quality in terms of the writing, and it just gets really dumb. Outside maybe Jason versus Freddy, which I do like. I kind of like the remake to an extent. Everything from Part 7 to Part 10, I don't really find watchable. If you enjoy them, that's fine. Love what you love. That said, this fan film proceeds with the Jarvis story, which I would argue after Part 6 is the important story, because the story of the rivalry between Voorhees and Jarvis should have been the focus of the story, but it wasn't. And we've got the movie starting off with Tom McLaughlin, the director of Part 6,
Coming in for a cameo. His character ended up lining up the tombstones of Pamela and Jason Voorhees,
complaining about how much work it was, which is pretty funny, and begs for booze money from Elias Voorhees, who tosses him the money and tells him not to talk to anyone about this. Role of Elias Voorhees is played by my favorite Jason Voorhees actor, the one from Part 6, and he plays the role of Elias Voorhees with a lot of menace. In a lot of ways, I'm actually going to argue he's scarier than Jason. Jason is just a zombie. This guy seems like he's a demon, some sort of otherworldly force of nature. Can't be reasoned with, can't be bought, so to speak. The actor and the film does a good job showing there's something unnatural about him, far more so than Jason. Jason's just a butchering machine. This guy, there's an intelligence about him. And the movie is lined up with references to other Friday the 13th iterations. In this film, it's been 30 years or so since Tommy finished off Jason in Part 6, and I think he got married to that female love interest. Who knows? But then he got divorced, and his ex kind of was a bit of a douche to him. Took him for all he was worth, tore his kids from him in one custody, on top of forcing him into court-mandated therapy, which he did not like, and quit as soon as he could, with his therapist having very visible, evident contempt for Tommy. Even though she knows Tommy was telling the truth and that Jason's out there, she is helping to cover up Jason on behalf of the police chief. With the police chief and Tommy's grandmother being involved in covering up the story of Jason, because apparently they were the camp counselors from 1956 or 57. That said, this movie also posits in the past that Elias was grief-stricken when he found out his son died and ended up killing two of the camp counselors from the camp at the same time that Pamela was killing another couple. So that Pamela and Elias were essentially co-conspirators in crime.
A killer couple.
Yep, which I actually like that. It adds more to the family history. Quite frankly, Pamela she was not dumb in the first movie. She just seemed too loony to strategize. Whereas Elias seems like he was the sort to at least have a plan. Movie brings in the idea that he revived Jason using the one book from Evil Dead. However, he kept Jason from Pamela. Probably so that Pamela would keep killing, which is pretty twisted and evil. And it's revealed at the end of this movie that Elias has 3 different death certificates in 3 different counties in the United States, which is terrifying. The first one I'm not sure of. I didn't get a good view of. The second one was from 1958 and he was cremated. And then the last one was from 2011 and he was buried and he keeps coming back, which shows that whatever Jason is runs essentially in the family. We know Jason's a zombie, but his dad does not seem to be a zombie. He seems to be a demon or something. Tommy Jarvis, for his part, has essentially become, I guess, a demon hunter or something. He's dealing with a certain stigma alongside some of the other Friday the 13th survivors, and their families have dealt with this stigma. Tommy is hated by his eldest daughter, who despises the fact that he basically wanted her and her sister to all but be preppers, prepare for the day when Jason would come back. Essentially, Tommy did his best to instruct them on the fact that Jason's out there. Eldest daughter then let society dictate to her what she thinks and started conforming like a good little girl. Younger daughter is a goth who's really into video games and shooters. I'm not sure what else about her. The film doesn't really focus too much on her. At least this one doesn't. We get enough information about her. The thing is, she's neglected by her great-grandmother when she's left with her after eldest daughter, Angelica, finds a note saying he's back. Tommy basically tried to warn her he's back. Tommy then ends up going missing with Angelica, one friend, who then gathers together a group of his own friends, all relatives of characters from previous movies, such as the niece of Jenny from part 2. I think her name is Heather. I forget who she's related to. And you've got the nephew of Sandra and Rob. Sandra being one of the girls from part 3, and Rob being the guy from part 4 who was hooking up with Tommy's sister. Rob's nephew, Jeff, is determined to go kill Jason and avenge the murder of his aunt and uncle, whom he dearly loved, as well as his family reputation. This in spite of the fact that his dad had told him for years, don't go near Camp Crystal Lake. Jeff's hunger for justice, though, proves to be his undoing as Jason hunts down and kills these relatives of his previous victims. The actress who was hired to play Jenny's niece looks remarkably like Jenny. She does try the tactic of, mother is talking to you, Jason, and whatnot. Initially, Jason seems a little confused, but then he gets angry, seeing through her trick, and murders her very brutally, more so in some ways than the other kills throughout the movie. I ended up asking you, do you think maybe he actually thinks it's Jenny from part 2?
It's possible because
they look exactly alike.
Because Jason, a part of him doesn't think, but we know he has feelings, primarily hate and anger.
Oh, yeah. And he does have a pretty good memory, though I don't think he has a good sense of time.
Because of the way he survives, time isn't something that is a concept to him.
That said, Angelica gets all of her friends killed, and of course we have the usual Friday the 13th nudity and comedy and incompetence on the part of a lot of the people going into the forest. And you do have some comedic kills, I will admit. Like the one deputy killed by the road sign, which is utterly hilarious and gory. You have in turn the one guy who was Angelica's semi-love interest, is an author and has been trying to fight tooth and nail to reveal the truth, and is apparently one of Tommy's contacts as well. However, he's brutally murdered. All that guy was trying to do throughout the movie was the right thing. A lot of the heroic characters who go with Angelica are obviously all good people, but the trouble is they are all killed in brutal ways, and Angelica at the end throws herself against Jason trying to kill him because using the powers of the final girl. However, Elias subverts those rules and brutally wounds her. Then her sister and I think some cousin or whatever show up, and the two girls are horrified, screaming, and Elias decides, you know what, kill the girls too, they're annoying me. And Jason pretty much goes, kill kids? Not entirely realizing I think one of them is actually Tommy's daughter. So, he kind of objects and fake kills his dad. I think he meant to kill his dad. It's Jason, he always means it. But his dad's basically a demon and disappears soon after.
Soon enough, Jason will want to work with his dad.
Because his dad's the one pretty much almost directing him. Almost. Sort of. It's just Jason's not exactly someone you can control. You just point him in a direction and get the heck out of his way. As to the police officer who happens upon the scene, he helps rescue Angelica, and at the end we get Tommy on the phone, but the phone crackles and breaks up. Of course, it's 2 weeks after the events of the movie, and Angelica and her sister are tearful and frightened as they now realize that their great-grandmother was killed. What they think was Jason, but it was really Elias who murdered her for having let his kid drown, 60 years ago? Wow, that's a lifetime ago, man. That said, she has added sin upon sin. She lost her granddaughter and she still tried to cover it up. And her daughter-in-law. That's just horrifying. And she looked the other way while her grandson was committed, despite him having told the truth the whole time. That's just... The way they build her up, she's pretty scummy. On the other hand, you've got a complicated issue. And she did try to make a stand against Elias in her house. But Elias is a bit of a monster. And
the fact that instead of begging, she decided, screw you. She knew she was going to die. She might as well...
I think he revels in his evil. But in the second, the way Elias talks, there's a filter of sorts so that it sounds like a demon or something. Anyways, let's rate this movie.
Personally, I will say it's a good 3.25. The Friday the 13th series is probably my favorite slasher flicks.
Yeah, they're the best, although that's not saying much, given with some of the movies. Some are great. I've got mixed feelings about part 1. Part 2 I really like. Part 2, Part 4, and Part 6 I really like. The rest of the series I'm not the biggest fan of. Then you've got the remake, which I think is pretty good. The Jason vs. Freddy movie was obviously really good, in my opinion. But this one, I'm going to say a 2.3. Trying to figure out the timeline issue of great-grandma was confusing me for a while, and there's something not adding up with the various years of character ages and whatnot. That minor timeline hiccup aside, it is a good flick. And you know what? This movie, this fan film, is better than a lot of actual films released by Hollywood and whatnot. And this was entirely crowdfunded. Same with the second one. So it's just remarkable how good it is. And the actors are all really good. Even the extras are really good. Like the guy who plays the drunkard, Louis, he's incredible. He does a great job. Yeah, this is just a really, 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 really good film. And it's the sort of thing horror junkies will love. And it's interesting that it's a better film than some of the actual films. Although I said there's some hiccups with the timeline, it adds to a lot of the details in previous movies. So that you can watch all of the 6 originals and then jump to this one and it'll feel natural. Highly recommend this movie. So that don't just smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Jason going after one of his victims. Go watch this movie and subscribe to their channel.